Hello hockey fans and welcome back to another video. Last Sunday, I released a video explaining why each team in this year's playoffs deserves to win the 2022 Stanley Cup. Well, in the comments of that video, Controlled Demolition suggested that it would be far more interesting to discuss why each team doesn't deserve to win this year's championship instead. And I must admit, I kind of agree with him, guys. After all, whether they have come close to the cup in recent years, but they just couldn't seal the deal, they have disappointed their fanbase by underperforming time after time, or they have already won a championship over the last few seasons, there's a myriad of reasons why every team shouldn't win this year. So why not crack a few more jokes at your favourite team's expense and explore each argument in a little more detail, right? Now before you sprint down to the comments to tell me that I don't know anything about your favourite team and that I should stick to football because I'm from England, just remember that this is all meant to be in good fun and you shouldn't take anything I say too seriously here. I'm just joking around, you know. Or am I? So in today's video, join me as we explore why every NHL playoff team doesn't deserve to win the 2022 Stanley Cup. Now for the sake of consistency, it makes a lot of sense to run through each team in the same order as I did in my previous video, so let's start once again with the Nashville Predators. Oh, Nashville, Nashville, Nashville. You had your chance to go all the way in 2017, but you just couldn't do it, could you? Sure, you can blame the referees all you want for losing that series, but you could have won your franchise's first Stanley Cup championship half a decade ago, and you simply blew it, guys. Now let's face it, folks, Nashville simply aren't good enough this year to go all the way and win the championship. Yes, I know that Duchesne and Johansson have produced career years for themselves, and I know that Roman Josi has been spectacular on the blue line for them, but you've been dominated so far in your series against Colorado. You've got to face some extremely difficult competition even to reach the finals if you by some incredible miracle manage to defeat Colorado in this first round, and UC Saros hasn't even sniffed the playoffs yet, let alone taken to the ice with the team and suited up in an actual playoff game. You may have had a surprisingly strong season this year, and I will give you credit where credit is due, but sorry Predators fans, 2022 isn't your year. You might be upset with what I've said, but you can't deny there's an element of truth there, you know. Next up, we have the Washington Capitals. Now, not only did the Capitals win a championship just 4 years ago now, and they got their first taste of the Cup much more recently than some of the other teams in the postseason this year, but the Eastern Conference is just so stacked this season, and the Capitals simply don't hold up against their contemporaries. I mean, come on guys, you can't even decide who your starting netminder is. How am I supposed to trust you to win 4 rounds in the playoffs? While this team produced a far better regular season than a number of the playoff teams from the Western Conference, and while I would love to see Ovechkin win another championship and see the crazy partying he has with it afterwards, I just don't see it happening, folks. Sure, you might win a game or two, you might make it a close series against Florida in round 1, but don't get your hopes up, Caps fans. You're gonna need a miracle to ever come close to the finals. Moving on, we have the Dallas Stars. Oh, Dallas, 2020 was your year, fellas. You came so close during one of hockey's toughest postseasons, and you just couldn't get it done. And then how do you follow up that performance the following year? By missing the playoffs altogether. Why should we as hockey fans believe that you will finally do it this time around? You guys couldn't even make it to the playoffs last year. You were on the golf course this time last season. Sure, Jason Robertson has been a wonderful discovery, and I could watch Alexander Radulov score goals until my dying day, but how are we supposed to trust this group to go all the way? Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin haven't shown any indication that they are capable of leading this team to the promised land, so why should anything change this time around? Are they good players in their own right? Sure, of course they are, but unless they take their game to an unprecedented level that we've never seen before, and unless the Dallas Stars can actually pick a goalie to be their go-to starter and stop this carousel of netminders they seem to have going on, things aren't going to turn out the way that Stars fans would like. I'm sorry Dallas, you're just not good enough this year. You had your chance 2 years ago, and you blew it. Next, we have the Boston Bruins. Now, it's been 11 years since Boston last won the Cup, and I may have told you in my previous video to never bet against the Bruins because they prove plenty of people wrong, but this roster sure is counting themselves out of the playoffs so far, eh folks? After all, they faced Carolina's backup netminder in Game 1 of the first round, they forced him out of the game by injuring him, nice one David Pastrnak, real smooth there buddy, and they're still down in this first round series while they're playing against the Hurricanes' third string netminder. If the Boston Bruins can't win this series, despite facing a rookie netminder who very few people outside of the Hurricanes organization had even heard of before this postseason began, then they don't deserve to make it past this first round, they don't deserve to go on a long playoff run, and they certainly don't deserve to win the Stanley Cup, folks. The Bruins have one of the most consistent forward lines the league has seen for quite some time, and they have plenty of solid players of their own up and down their lineup. So figure it out, Bruins. You're a big boy team now. Let's do it. Come on. Moving on to the Los Angeles Kings. Now, LA, let's be real here, fellas. You won 2 Stanley Cups in the last decade and you were one of the best teams of the 2010s. You've already made your history, it's time for somebody else to have a go, okay? Your roster is primarily made up of aging veterans who are still remaining from your mini-dynasty and young up-and-comers who have little to no playoff experience between them. You kinda seem to be caught between two worlds and neither of them seem likely to bring you a championship this year. Oh, and add to that the need for a rapidly aging Jonathan Quick to somehow carry this team on his back and produce 16 wins against far superior teams both in the West and the East, and that doesn't exactly sound like a recipe for success, does it? Sorry, Kings fans, you've still got a ways to go before you find yourself back under the spotlight. Oh, and I still haven't forgiven you for 2014 yet, you know. Curse you, Alec Martinez! Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, the Penguins won back-to-back championships like half a decade ago now, so they really don't need to win another one for a little while, do they? Let's be honest, there are several other franchises that are far more deserving to win it than Pittsburgh. They've won their fair share of cups, time to give somebody else a chance. And not only that, the core trio that won those cups in Crosby, Malkin and Letang, they're starting to enter the twilight years of their career. Your supporting cast isn't good enough to help them go all the way, let's be honest here, Penguins fans. Do you definitely belong in the playoffs? Yes, absolutely, but the Stanley Cup champions? I don't think so, boys. Not only that, Pittsburgh are gonna trust their third string netminder, who's in his mid-30s and has only played 2 games for the team before the postseason this year. They're expecting him to carry the load for them in the crease. Face it, Penguins fans, your team isn't strong enough to go all the way. I think it's time for Pittsburgh to stop avoiding the inevitable and face reality. Your championship window has already ended. And you know what? That's okay. After all, you guys managed to win a pair of championships out of that window. You did far better than most teams in this playoffs, that's for sure. Moving on, we have the Edmonton Oilers. Oh, Edmonton. The team that's been handed a plethora of first overall draft picks has somehow gotten their hands on 2 of the greatest players of this generation, and yet they still can't make it past the first round. Sure, the roster has more depth than I think we've seen for quite some time now. Zach Hyman has been a pretty strong addition to this team for the year, and Evander Kane has brought plenty of goal scoring this season. But you have 2 of the greatest players in the game at the moment on your team, and you've had them there for several years now, and you still haven't made it deep into the postseason. Why should this year be any different for you? And I don't want to hear about Mike Smith. I don't care how great he's been for you recently. He has never taken a team to the Stanley Cup Finals, and he's 40 years old. He won't take you all the way, Edmonton, and you know it. I suggest that the Oilers use this postseason to figure out what it really takes to go deep into the playoffs and use these lessons when next year rolls around, put them into practice, and maybe win the cup in 2023. Whether you're talented enough to go all the way is kind of irrelevant. You haven't earned the right to lift the trophy just yet, Edmonton. Make a deep postseason run first and then we'll talk, okay? Moving on, we have the New York Rangers. Now, they may have won their last Stanley Cup championship 30 years ago, and they may have finally finished their rebuild that's taken them about half a decade, but New York still have a ways to go before they can consider themselves legitimate cup contenders. I mean, come on, they haven't made the playoffs in half a decade now since 2017, and they have a roster filled with young, inexperienced players that have never played postseason hockey. I'm sorry guys, Igor Shesterkin can't bail you out every single game, no matter how otherworldly he's played so far this postseason. Putting my personal bias aside here, the Rangers are pretty much the new kids on the block block in the playoffs, and they need to earn their stripes before they reach the upper echelons of the league and are considered deserving of winning a Stanley Cup. After all, nearly every single championship team has faced some kind of postseason disappointment before they eventually reach the top, and I think this year will be the Rangers' year to learn how to do that. Sorry Rangers fans, I too would love to see them lift the cup, but they need to earn their place first. Igor Shesterkin's been incredible, but I think another year of experience and next season they'll be good to go, right? Next, we have the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Blues won the championship like 3 years ago now. You guys really don't need to get your hands on another cup in the near future. After all, you had to wait over 50 years for your first championship. I think you can be a little patient, you know? Sure, St. Louis seem to have produced a resurgent season this year, and they've combined much of their cup-winning core from a few years ago with some strong individual performances from several younger players on the team, but their goaltending situation, in my opinion, is still an absolute mess. Are you guys telling me that Ville Husso is going to lead the Blues to another Stanley Cup? Husso certainly had a great year for himself, so no disrespect to him, but I'm just not seeing it. And yes, I'm sure some of you are arguing, but Oddman Rush, what about Jordan Binnington? He did it in 2019. Are you talking about the Jordan Binnington that joined the roster, helped the team go from last place in the regular season standings, and somehow led the team to a playoff berth, and then managed to lead them all the way to a Stanley Cup? Is that the Binnington you're referring to? You're telling me that Ville Husso and Jordan Binnington are similar players right now? I didn't think so. St. Louis, you're not going to win the cup this year. It's okay. Try again next year. Gloria will help you, okay? Moving on to the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Okay, Tampa, you've had your fun now. You've literally won the last 2 Stanley Cups in a row. You've had your turn. I'm cutting you off now, Tampa. That's it. You're done. Not only have you kept the trophy for yourself for over 2 years now during the entirety of the pandemic pretty much so far, and you've refused to share it with the rest of the league during that span, you want to go and win it a 3rd time in a row as well? Have you no shame, Tampa? I don't care how good Tampa's roster still is, how experienced they are in the postseason at this point, and I don't care whether they are legitimately capable of pulling off the three-peat by the end of this postseason. It's pretty clear that the Lightning don't deserve the cup this year. After all, they've had it too good for too long. Moving on, we have the Calgary Flames. Now, Calgary may be one of the favourites to make it out of the Western Conference this year, but in my opinion, I don't think this team deserves to win the cup. After all, this organisation has done nothing but vastly underperform on their expectations and disappoint their fanbase time and time again for the last half a decade at least. Why should this year be any different for them? Sure, their roster was practically handcrafted for playoff hockey, and Daryl Sutter seems to have fit in perfectly and brought out the best in nearly every player on the roster, but can they sustain this success over a grueling postseason run and finally go all the way for the first time since the 1980s? I don't know if they can, folks. Maybe it's just me, but that's the kind of vibe I'm getting from them, you know? I don't care how strong the Flames roster is, or how their playing style is suited to the playoffs, it's time for Calgary to actually make some progress during the postseason, and prove to us whether they are finally capable of being a contender, or whether they become just another pretender once again. So enough empty promises, Calgary. Let your play do the talking from now on. We need to see it on the ice, not in the press conferences after the game, okay? Next up, we have everybody's favourite team to meme on, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, whilst I definitely feel for Leafs fans who have been waiting half a century for their organisation to finally figure things out and clinch another championship, having to witness the unsufferable members of the Leafs fanbase win a championship and gloat about it for the next 12 years would be absolutely unbearable for the rest of the NHL. Now, that's not to say that there aren't any good Leafs fans out there, because there are plenty of them too, and I want to give you guys credit. You guys have suffered long enough, you deserve to have some successful ones. But I'm not talking about you guys, I'm talking about the insufferable ones on Twitter, you know? So many members of that fan base are absolutely impossible to deal with on even a basic human interaction level, despite their team being terrible for decades now. Imagine how much worse and how much more confident they would be if they actually won the cup this year and found some kind of success. Guys, it would be bloody awful! Yes, Toronto have a really good team on their hands, and yes, they do stand as good of a chance as pretty much everybody else in the league this year, but whether they bow out in the first round yet again, or whether they make it all the way to the finals, I guarantee that Toronto will find a way to screw this up and somehow self-destruct in spectacular fashion once again. After all, they do it so often, it's practically in their DNA now. Moving on to the Minnesota Wild. Now, Minnesota have definitely been a fun team to watch this season. Kirill Kaprizov has been an absolute revelation for that franchise, and Marc-Andre Fleury was a pretty nice pickup during the trade deadline, but the Wild don't have what it takes to win the Cup this year. After all, you guys have never made it to a Stanley Cup Finals, let alone actually gone all the way and won the Cup. What makes this year any different? I don't care how many players are producing career years this season. Why should you win it when you're not even the best team in the West? Is it possible that Minnesota could make it to the second round, or maybe even challenge for the conference finals? Sure, why not? But I really don't see them going much further than that, folks. I mean, come on, they will have to face Colorado or Calgary if they want to finally make history and reach the Stanley Cup Finals. Are you telling me that the Wild can beat either of these teams 4 times over a 7-game span? I don't think so. Oh, and on a side note, Minnesota calls itself the state of hockey, yet neither of the 2 NHL franchises they've ever had in that city has ever managed to lift the Stanley Cup. I think everyone outside of Minnesota can agree that that nickname kinda sounds a little dumb, right? State of hockey and you haven't won the cup? Come on, guys. Maybe work on winning a championship before giving yourself a fancy title like that. You just haven't earned the honour yet, come on. Next, we have the Carolina Hurricanes. Ooh, the Hurricanes. What an interesting team this postseason, eh, folks? Now, Carolina have been a pretty good team for quite some time now. They've made it to the second round, the conference finals over the last few seasons. But would you consider them a great team? Well, considering that they are currently riding their 3rd-string netminder in the crease, I think they should be a little more worried about surviving the first round as opposed to getting their hands on the Stanley Cup. I mean, yes, riding a hot rookie goaltender may have worked for them back in 2006, but a lot has changed in the last 16 years, Carolina. There's no denying that Carolina have talented offensive players, a very strong defensive core, and a great coach in Rod Brind'Amour, but until they can prove that they can weather the storm and finally triumph over their newfound adversity, Carolina should be more worried about making it to the later rounds of the postseason, let alone actually winning a cup, you know? After all, defeating the Bruins is one thing, but facing the league's real heavy hitters will be a much tougher challenge, especially if you're still relying on a rookie goaltender to lead the way. Do they have the talent to do it in the rest of their roster? Absolutely. Will they be able to stay healthy enough to see it all the way through? I have my doubts, guys. Penultimately, we have the best team from the Western Conference, the Colorado Avalanche. Can the Avalanche finally live up to their potential this year and find a way to go all the way and win the cup? Better yet, guys, will they actually manage to make it out of the second round this time? Come on, Avalanche, we've been waiting for you to hit your stride long enough. I don't care how great Nathan MacKinnon is, I don't care how clutch Cale Makar is, and I certainly don't care how good this roster is on paper. I refuse to take the Avalanche seriously until they can reach the Western Conference Finals and finally prove to us that they actually want to win the cup. This team has far too much depth and far too much talent to even consider bowing out of the postseason before the midway point yet again. But I will believe it when I see it, Avalanche. Sure, they can talk the talk all they like, but until they finally walk the walk, this conversation's over. Get it sorted out, Colorado. Your reputation's on the line. Don't disappoint us again. And finally, we have the best team from the Eastern Conference, the Florida Panthers. Now, the Panthers may have won the President's Trophy this year and pretty much dominated the rest of the league for much of the season, but if the last few years are any kind of indication, the Panthers are all bark and no bite, so why shouldn't anyone expect anything different this time around? Sure, their roster is stacked in almost every position, and they are overflowing with depth pretty much up and down the lineup, but this team has struggled to make it to the playoffs on multiple occasions, let alone actually go on a deep postseason run. The Panthers have been the epitome of disappointment more times than most people can count, and that's not even mentioning Sergei Bobrovsky's mediocre play between the pipes. Can you actually tell me with a straight face that Sergei Bobrovsky is a good enough netminder to lead this team to 16 wins against the best franchises across the entire league? I don't care how much he has improved this season, the guy has been underwhelming from the second he landed in Florida, and underwhelming goaltenders typically don't win your championships, do they? Florida are a great team on paper, sure, but can they actually convert that into on-ice success when the chips are down and their backs are against the wall? Well, they better do everything in their power to prove that they can, because this is probably going to be the best chance they're going to get for quite some time. After all, guys, 1996 is drifting further and further into the history books, and the Panthers have been pretty irrelevant since, so you might want to try and figure this out, guys, because you might be waiting for another few decades if not. And that was a look at why every single NHL playoff team doesn't deserve to win the 2022 Stanley Cup. What do you guys think about my argument against each team? Was I fair in my criticism, or did I rely too heavily on overused and outdated jokes? Do I need to get a little bit more original material? Maybe, but I wanted to keep the long-running jokes going, you know? Also, what do you think about this style of video? Do you enjoy me sat here in front of the webcam, kind of cracking jokes in a little bit more of an informal setting, and talking more, using a bit more of my personality as opposed to just rolling off a script and stats and everything like that? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Clayton Hallam, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Raquel, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.